So I'm here with Ross Bryant, who is a friend and also a comedian, improviser. I want to dig into a lot of improvisation stuff today because I can't bring myself to say the word improv comfortably, and I have like a mental hang up with it. But we'll get to that.
Yeah, same.
Good. I'm curious. So, like, the podcast always starts off just with like a question of how coffee fits into your life, and I already sort of know the answer to this, but for other listeners, can you give us a sense of what coffee means to you?
Um, I mean, fuel, but also it's been there. Coffee culture's been there in my life over the course of my life as a source of camaraderie and a place where I just spend a lot of time working, and yeah, it was there for me when I needed it. I'll say that for it. And I will say that I've met so many very cool, interesting people. I was always impressed how the people I met in the coffee world were very often these very just super magpie minded polymaths, like really into a lot of interesting things, always had a lot of interesting things going on while being often very unassuming. But if you could get them to open up and be like, oh, wow, you're like a secret genius.
Totally. What was your day-to-day or like weekly coffee drinking look like?
I drink probably 2 cups of coffee a day. I make them in the AeroPress, and I that's what does it for me. And that's, I mean, in quarantine, I feel like like we were talking before you started recording, you have to build routine into your day because it's not coming from external sources quite often, and just the ritual of making it provides that a little bit, and also one to get your day going, and then at the halfway point when you want to really start to make yourself anxious and crazy.
Do you feel like, you said coffee is fuel for you, like on a scale of 1 to Lynch, how much does it like feed your creative practice?
I actually think it does a lot, like especially in quarantine. I kind of start every day by making breakfast, and then making a cup of coffee and sitting down with and drawing for like an hour, and just to kind of get juices flowing. And just that ritual of having mug, pen, paper has become one of the joys of my morning, and I won't give it up. So yeah, it's definitely like the fuel, the ritual of it.
Mhm.
I've got it right here, right now.
I was debating whether I should make some, but I feel like I've been over caffeinated for too many podcasts, and I wanted to, give you the full John.
Oh yeah.
So, improvisation. I'm a jazz musician. You're a comedian, improviser, and I really just can't bring myself to say improv. And so I'm wondering, if you agree with this. How do people speak about this? How do you wish that they would speak about this? Just purely in terms of language and terminology.
Wow. I feel no, when you do it, I mean, you have to, I have the same sort of like, not to use an overused kind of internet word, but cringe about improv or improvisation. And that's because I feel like the reputation that improv and improvisers, especially comedy improvisers, like get over time is of a kind of like overbearing, sweaty ham who's gonna like one, sell any conversation out for a joke, but also is kind of like, I love comedy and Funko Pops and nerd culture, and like and which isn't to say that that like I'm not into many aspects of dorky culture, but like that I feel like it's accrued all this like cultural baggage where if I tell someone I'm an improviser, I always then feel compelled to like apologize or say, but I promise I'm not like annoying. like, so I less will just say like blanket that I do improv, or I'm an improviser, and more just like describe like specific shows or things that I do. Also because like, as you may relate to this, although as a musician, so much of improvisation I feel like is documenting your performances, like
Mhm.
having your performances on record, and improvised comedy isn't really like that. Like it's very ethereal. It's there and gone. And the best performances I've seen and been a part of exist only in the time and space that they happened, and in the memories of the people who were there. So it's not a thing where you like have this backlog of like a body of work to rest on. So when you tell people you're an improviser, you just kind of have to like to have trust that they'll be like, and I know what I'm talking about. Like there's nothing I can really point you to that shows you that, other than maybe
Mhm.
my reputation in whatever scene I'm a part of. But like reputation is that only means so much. So that so yeah, I think that's I, I don't know if that ramble counts as an answer.
It does, yeah. I guess like jazz musicians go to the quote woodshed to like hone their chops and that type of thing. What's I guess like improv I can't say it still, the improvised comedian comic, the equivalent of the woodshed.
Well, we rehearse, and I mean, I feel like some people, especially like your mom and dad, your uncle, when you tell them, like, I'm going to well, we do improv rehearsal. They're like, rehearse it. Well, you just get up there and do it. Um, but like, I think the sports analogy is actually pretty useful, where it's like you rehearse as a group to get better as a group. It's like it's not like a basketball team ever plays the same game of basketball twice, but you can practice a set of skills that ensures that that group of people plays a better game of basketball each time. And that's what you work on in rehearsal. And while you work on skills like listening and reacting and also just like practicing the formal structure of whatever improvised format you want to do, you're also building what is probably the most important part of rehearsal, which is just like the camaraderie and morale of the group.
Mhm.
Because that's the most important thing, is that when everybody is like kind of delighted by each other and has each other's vibe, that's the thing that's ultimately most useful and the most charming and powerful on stage.
Gotcha.
Beyond a
Okay.
group of people that are like really struggling to quote get it right unquote.
Uh, it, so this makes me think of like, I guess you're talking about like the group dynamic, but also, you have to hone your own individual skills. And a lot of that seems almost like it's like more like hardware type things of like, processing time and, or I guess that's still software, but like, it's still like on the individual level. So what does honing your craft look like, when it's not as a group?
I think people, yeah, comedy improv is so collaborative that I think people think about like feeding the it. Improv, I feel like borrows some of the terminology of like acting training, where you can, if you want, like, which provides you with a bunch more cringy vocabulary that I still have a lot of affection for. Like where it's like as an individual, you want to hone your instrument being you. So
Okay.
whether that's having like some people I know, and I know I feel the same way, like actively try to build your frame of reference. So like always be engaged in pop culture, current events, follow your interests, build your vocabulary, um, so that you're not kind of thrown for a loop and stumped by what might be thrown at you. Um, but aside from that, like a lot of the skills are less like it is. I don't know. There is this kind of this Zen quality of like a lot of it is getting out of your own way. So it's less about like gathering skills and more like letting go of
Mhm.
judgment of yourself and your fellow players. And so I don't know that there's necessarily a way to work on that other than practice. A lot of it is just like an annoying thing that improv coaches and directors will tell beginners is that like, well, you're at the level where the only thing that's really going to get you better is just reps, is just doing it more. It's like you've got all the skills. It's just like you kind of need to demystify doing shows enough to where that you care about it, uh, so where you care about it less, so that
Mhm.
I feel like so that you can kind of get out of your own way on stage. Because right now what I'm seeing is a performer that desperately wants to succeed, and that's all I'm seeing. I'm not seeing someone who is actually entertaining me. Like um
Gotcha.
so
Mhm.
yeah, there I feel like you as you and I've coached a little bit as well, and so you sort of see the progress from person who's struggling, person who's trying to get it right, person who is getting it right, but is really kind of concerned about like the rules and regulations, then somebody who like has gotten the reps and has built up this kind of like unearned swagger where they're like, where like then all of their performances are like making fun of them breaking the rules, and so
Mm.
their improv becomes like completely self-reflexive and about improv, and you kind of move through that no man's land, and then when that begins to be less delightful to you, then you begin to just like listen, react, and have fun, and that's when like that person really takes off and is like uh just like get out of their own way and like expressing themselves on stage as an improviser.
Word. Um, this makes me think of like stand-up comedy and how much different that is. I guess in terms of like the algorithm there seems to be like come up with an idea and like see if it dies or not in front of a stage or in front of an audience,
Uh-huh.
and so it's like almost more evolutionary trial and error type thing. But like the the morale that you're talking about with improvised comedy seems like it's a little bit more like there's a safety net. Do you feel like that's fair to say, or?
Absolutely. I think um and it may be a question of temperament too, because I feel like some people who do stand up, um some of them have said that like they really cling to the material as their safety net, like having something prepared. um but to me, I feel like improv provides a much more sturdy safety net, because you always have your fellow performers to both rely on and also diffuse the shame of a bad show. It's like every comedian of every kind has had dozens and dozens and hundreds of shows that didn't succeed or were up to their standards, and like, and as a stand-up, as someone who hasn't done a ton of it, I've only done a little bit of solo performance, like like it's crushing when things don't go well. It's great when they go great. And as an improviser, like when things go badly, it's like you get off stage with a group of improvisers, and it's like you have a moment of like, ah, that kind of sucked. But then a few seconds later, you're laughing about like, I cannot believe how much that tanked. Like there's fun in the failure also, in a
Mhm.
way. But also, so there's that part of it where like you share you share the blame in a way that makes it less hard on you. um but that can have another side too, where like if the morale of the group isn't there, if a show doesn't go well, then because it's a group, it can create divisions in a group. If somebody believes that like there's a weak link or a couple of weak links, and then cracks and divisions start to form and groups fall apart and personalities clash. um the other side of the safety net, I think, is that, and this is something that annoys me about improv, is that like part of it is like you go up on stage and you say, we're making this all up, and part of what that does is you're hoping that's like, here's the parlor trick of improv. Be impressed, audience, that this is all coming up off the top of her head. But there's a subtle other thing going on, which is like, hey, audience, lower the bar of your expectations because we're making it up.
Mhm.
So don't expect gold. And I I realize that like, I think that is kind of part of the appeal that gets people into improv, because it feels like a safer space. But I feel like at a certain point, you're like, I know I become very annoyed when I see that like really played up. It's like, I don't want you to lower the bar for this. I want to leap as much as possible over the expectations of the audience,
Yeah,
and make something that they're like, I cannot believe that that was made up.
yeah.
That's what
There's
you
a
want.
lot.
Not saying that happens all the time.
There's a lot of jazz where I feel like the best stuff is when you're not sure whether it's improvised or not. Like it
Hmm.
sounds spontaneous, but like it's kind of like too impressive to be spontaneous. And so, I mean, that's what I love. And then I feel like years later when I re-listen to it, I might be like, oh yeah, I can tell now that's improvised, and like something clicks where it's like, the secret sauce has been revealed. Um, yeah. Let's see here. I'm curious sort of about like underlying comedic principles or like mechanisms, and like I tend to over intellectualize things like this, and just based on our conversations, like working together in the past and stuff, like I feel like you are philosophically minded and will go to these nerdy realms with me.
I like it. Yeah.
So to what extent can comedy be formalized?
um, I mean, you're talking to somebody who just comedy in general, as almost like comedy with a capital C. Is there a formal structure to it? Like, there are people I think who've tried to like boil it down to like a simple formal like statement of like um of just like a broken expectation. The structure
Mm,
of any comedic moment is like, you think X happens, but to your surprise, Y happens. Um, so that's a part of it, but then then it's more complicated than that, because what makes comedy different from just like a horror movie, or like
mm,
a mere prank. Um, and then it's a question of like, okay, maybe it's an unexpected surprise with and a bit of opinion behind it, or a point of view.
mm,
Um, and whatever that point of view is gets into like taste, right? Like the whole like if you're using that to like totally dunk on the less fortunate or something, if you're punching down, that's, to me,
yeah,
that is not necessarily comedy, that's cruelty. um not So I don't know, I'm just kind of riffing here. That might be
yeah,
that might be
totally.
one way to do it. um I think in improv, like one of the big statements is that like comedy is just truth, that we
Mm,
laugh when we see something that we recognize, whether it's a statement that feels really true, or or someone demonstrating like an exaggerated human behavior, but that still is like, I've seen that, I recognize that. That's the kernel of a lot of character comedy, is like, even if the character is like totally bonkers in their behavior, it's like it still is getting at a truth of something that you've seen in someone in real life behavior. So I mean, that's like, yeah, comedy is truth. It's almost like platonic thing. So that there is something beautiful in when you see it. Um, so that kind of separates it from like mere cleverness. Um,
mhm. There's this neuroscientist Carl Friston, and his whole thing is like, was it the free energy principle? And I guess the idea is kind of like, I'm going to totally oversimplify it, but just like your brain wants to uh, minimize the amount of sort of like prediction errors, or like it wants to minimize surprise. And so like it seems like comedy is sort of targeting specifically that, like, cognitive impulse. And
yeah,
so yeah, I don't know if that makes
you
your
go
brain
in
go anywhere.
expecting to be surprised, like in a safe space. It's almost, in a way, it's almost not the same. It's not the same, but this in a way, a lot of entertainment is like a roller coaster, right? It's like, I get to experience what it's like to have a near death moment, but I know it's safe. um I will have, and comedy provides like a, like, I will be um surprised, and people will say like crushingly true things, but it's in a safe, formal environment. um there's something to that, yeah.
Cool. You mentioned also sort of like making, like, the delivery of the joke and having a little bit of commentary. I'm wondering sort of like like, to what extent do comedians, like, do they need to make social commentary and cultural commentary? Like, how does that affect the quality and how it lands for you?
I I feel like everybody's kind of like comedic point of view is kind of up to them. I think there are points of view that are toxic,
Hmm.
but I don't think that comedy has a responsibility to be overtly like laden with message.
Hmm.
Like I feel like the not to get political or topical, but I feel like the last 4 years have shown us just how impotent much of political comedy is.
Hmm.
Like um I feel like we hit this threshold in like not even like 4 years ago, where it was like, oh, I guess a person sitting behind a desk and kind of dunking on the news of the day doesn't really change anything. I am the choir
Yeah.
being preached to. This is like, this just feels so empty, at least to me. I think there's a lot of comfort to be had, like in an insane world, to touch base with an entertainer who is providing like a sense of grounded sanity. There's value to that, but to me it doesn't. It's that there was very little edge to me in that. So I feel like the comedy that had the most like bite was maybe more hyper specific and more about like social dynamics and personal um, personal blind spots and blunders and things. Like to me, even really silly comedy can have a quote unquote message. What is it like? I don't know who said like you can't make any art that's not political.
Mhm.
Even the silliest art has has a message somehow. And that's I think my favorite stuff from this year was stuff that I was either a part of or saw was less about like beating you over the head with Orange Man is bad man and
Yeah.
more with like and more about like, oh, just the vibe of this, the behavior of this, the point of view tells me that what this is about celebrating inclusivity and wisdom and and shaming selfishness and arrogance and ignorance.
Mhm.
And you can do that in a way that's not like capital P political.
For sure. I was thinking about like Saturday Night Live. Like I've mostly been unimpressed with some of what they've been putting out recently, but the politics are just so overt. But it made me realize that there doesn't really seem to be any right wing comedy like that I'm aware of. Period. And I don't know if I'm just oblivious or if it's that like people that I associate with and myself
They
wouldn't
try,
consider it
man. They
funny.
do be trying. um,
Is there any
like,
genuinely funny right wing comedy?
I mean, I don't.
And I'm not asking for you to endorse any politics or
You're
anything.
gonna get me canceled, John. No, no, I mean, honestly, I feel like you might be able to imagine such a thing. Like, I mean, I can imagine comedy that makes fun of, and there's a lot of comedy that I like that makes fun of what you might call left-leaning or progressive tendencies, because I feel like they're like those things that we were talking about. I feel like there's a lot of like kind of wishy-washy self-centeredness in that
Mhm.
realm, and you can make fun of that, I think, in a way that is not overtly right-wing. Like, just because you're making fun of the like aspects of the left doesn't necessarily mean that you are then like you're right-leaning. So I think that there's a way of doing that without being it. But so that being said, I don't know that there is a way of doing like really sharp right-wing comedy, because so
Mhm.
much of like, because the ethos of it is like the, like it's hard for me to imagine Ayn Rand laughing about anything. You
Yeah.
know, can you imagine Ayn Rand telling a joke that wasn't at the expense of like a poor person? like or um or someone who's like a social parasite who had the gall to ask for like unemployment insurance. like um what I was touching on about like punching down, it's
Mhm.
like it's hard for me to imagine like really good comedy where it's like, yeah, wow, yeah, the coolest people that we should be that comedy should be celebrating are probably like hedge fund managers.
Oh man, I'm wondering what an Ayn Rand comedy
Yeah, I
routine
think it
would
would.
be like.
I mean, this now we're beating out like our own SNL sketch, which is our like Ayn Rand stand up comic king kings of objectivist comedy tour.
Yeah, like Milton Friedman stand-up
Yeah,
comedy.
Alan Greenspan.
So another thing that like I feel like is in these values of comedy that I tend like it hits a certain button for me, and I don't know if it's just that I'm like, ooh, I like noticed this, but self-reference seems to be like something that always makes something like seem more potent to me. Um, and I don't know if it's just like when something's like when they recapitulate a joke from earlier, or if there's some sort of through line, and I'm like, oh, I can tell that there was like a grander scheme, or like there was a little bit more depth to this. What do you think about that sort of self-reference?
um, let's see, like what do you what do you mean? Just can you give me an example?
I feel like in A lot of comedy, like in stand-up routines, somebody will like introduce a theme and then eventually like come back and reference that same theme, and it's
Mm,
like, oh yeah, but that's funny because I already talked about it. Um,
yeah.
and it's a subtlety, but like for me, it just seems to be like, oh yeah, they know the self-reference trick.
Yes, that is. I mean, in what we call in the biz a callback. Um, yeah, I mean that same thing is employed in improv too, or like at the end of your 30-minute to 50-minute show, you want to start tying back in themes, ideas, phrases, concepts, characters from earlier in the show, and when it comes off, it's great fun. Um, yeah, I think that's part of like making your performance, for lack of a better word, theatrical, where it's not just kind of a stream of consciousness, but of a piece. Like
Mm-hmm.
you that it wasn't just like a series of humorous events, but like you built a little world with its own logic and its own vocabulary, and things that you seeded earlier on pay off later. Um, yeah, that's hugely satisfying. As an improviser, you try to do that by just with listening and memory, and
Mm-hmm.
like and treating everything that happens as important, so it sticks in your brain. I will say that improvisation, I don't know if the music side of it is like this. I feel like the practice of it improved my memory.
Mm-hmm.
like like I couldn't tell you like what the process is, but just like hearing something, knowing that that's like fun, and sticking it in your brain, and then kind of forgetting about it, knowing that it will pop up when the time is right.
I think that I've noticed maybe a memory improvement too, but other sort of like lifestyle choices that go with playing jazz music probably have yielded a net negative.
Hmm. Interesting.
Uh, that makes me think of one of the. I have like this list of questions that are terribly organized, and I was just gonna try and like hit them as they come. But you're familiar with the Lambertronics world, and
Yes.
it seems like just like the ability to react quickly is important. And like, there's this dude Rick Rosner who's he wrote for Jimmy Kimmel, I think, but he's like super high IQ, like really strange dude. Like he sought out, getting high IQ scores
Huh.
through like obsessive test taking and stuff like that. So he would take, paracetam or aniracetam before going into the writer's room to be quick witted. And he was like, I don't need to take these when I'm just writing comedy, not in the writer's room, because it doesn't matter how fast it is. But I'm wondering, like, if if you and your group or anybody you collaborate with was just able to like turn up the reaction time or turn down the reaction time, what type of results do you think would happen?
Interesting. I've never heard of that as a performance enhancement. Although friends of mine who work in late night writers' rooms do tell me that is the vibe, that like it's just kind of like the riffiness of it goes by quick. So it's like get in
Hmm.
or get out. Um, uh, I feel like the reaction time. I think yeah. I feel like there's something to be said for bumping up everybody's reaction time. Um, I will say though, like that kind of like track I was describing of like your growth as an improviser from green beginner to like more kind of like fully formed performer. I think part of that journey is learning that like speed of reaction time isn't necessarily um all there isn't necessarily the most important thing. Like I feel like the person watching is like, you guys are so quick. If you're lucky enough to have done a show where people give you praise afterwards, things you might hear would be like, "You guys are so quick. What she said was so fast. You're so quick witted." And I feel like an improviser rarely thinks about it that way. You just think about it in terms of like, "Oh, I was just listening. I was just listening and
Hmm.
reacting. I reacted like my character would." It's way less a like, ah, think of joke. Thinking is like, um, I feel like the best kind of quick quote unquote moments in improv just come from you like being fully embodied in the character that you're playing, and just like coming
Hmm.
out with a very character appropriate response that is not on paper a joke, but gets a huge response just because it's so incredibly correct to what that character would do. Um, and that's my kind of favorite improv stuff too, because it almost doesn't translate in any other format. It's just like, it's just so you're just watching somebody so fully embody a moment that it's delightful and funny. Um, and so I don't know if there's a performing enhancement for that. That's what I
Mhm.
mean when I'm like, so much of this is about getting out of your own way, because you're tempted to be like, think, be quick-witted, have the gears
Mhm.
turning, like, and there is definitely a part of improv that is doing that. Like, you're engaging left brain and right brain, or you might say actor brain and director brain, where like part of you just wants to embody characters and react truthfully, but part of you has a more like God's eye view of like, what does this show need?
Mhm.
How much time till it's over? When is it time to start bringing back stuff? Um, at best, you're kind of toggling between those two. Um, so this is all my way of saying that I think quote unquote quick wittedness isn't as much a part of it as it appears.
So it maybe like the reaction time thing isn't the way to look at it. More being in flow and
Yeah.
yeah, and I guess like that would be more of like a reducing, like a reducing your brain power type thing, probably to get into that flow almost.
Right. And that's why if I do see improvisers using performance enhancements, it's like,
Alcohol.
you can imagine what they are. Yeah.
Mhm. Interesting. Yeah, and I mean, I guess the terminology that my transhumanist type people would say is like system one and system two from Kahneman's book,
Hmm.
Thinking Fast and Slow. I just have to name drop Daniel Kahneman once per podcast. Let's see here. So you also do a lot of like cartooning and that type of thing. What would you say that offers you that improv doesn't, or like
Um,
what itches are you trying to scratch with that you don't scratch with improv?
um, I think yeah, that it is patient more, or you have to be a little bit more patient. Improv is all about like, as a performer for me anyway, has a lot to do with instant gratification. um, and especially over the past year where I've been shut down, where theaters have been shut down. And I mean, I haven't performed live on stage since March of last year. Um,
Damn.
uh, like just having some creative practice for one is something, but it's also just like, I don't know, it was nice to just like have something that you engage with each day, and you can see, if not improvement, then at least like changes. You can see the skill changing and building. Um, and and you can also just, I think I'm also just like, I don't know, I, visual thinker, and I
Hmm.
like, if I have ideas, they're more kind of come out in images than words. Um, but also, yeah, that's really it. As far as like how it's different from, it's actually way harder for me than improvisation is, because like improvisation is collaborative and so much about reaction. And when you're faced with a blank sheet of paper, it's really just you and your materials and your idea. It's sometimes it really does feel like pulling teeth. I've been trying
Hmm.
to I've just started submitting New Yorker cartoons over the past couple of weeks. And
That's it.
and it's, and because I've always admired like the best New Yorker cartoonists. I just love I love the simplicity of style. I think it's, I really admire it as a distillation of an idea, like just expressing an interesting or comedic idea, like in the, almost like a haiku or a piece of calligraphy, like
Hmm.
just knocking it out in a couple of strokes, but making something really evocative. Um, Doing it is really tough, and I find that it's really difficult for me to come up with a picture first and then apply a caption afterwards. Like it's um some, if the image comes first, I'm usually, it takes like so much time for me to like really grind through a bunch of terrible ideas before I can come up with something that's like at all interesting to me. But if I
Hmm.
can come up with the full concept first, then it just like pops right out. Um so it's, yeah, it's just a totally different muscle. It's
Interesting.
yeah. there's something to improv too, where you're like invited to treat your fellow performers. I, I find myself regurgitating all these things from like improv classes or from like Del Close books, which I feel like all improvisers kind of like satirize and roll their eyes at, but I'm now deploying them very sincerely. So enjoy. But one of these like quotable quotes that you'll hear in classes is like, treat your fellow performers like geniuses and poets, because they will be if you treat them like that. And there's some truth to that. Like basically it's just like, hey, improve the morale of your group. If you respect each other, you'll bring out the best in each other. But I feel like that is a very difficult ethos to apply to yourself. When you are your own comedy partner, it's like you're your worst critic. You're the most judgmental of your own ideas. And so it's like getting into another kind of flow state, kind of where you have to like judge yourself less and just try to nurture an idea, even if it's just a silly little cartoon. But as somebody who has a lot of anxiety and self, like insecurity and self-doubt, like we all do, and I feel like cartoonists seem to have maybe more of it than most. Cartoonists are a pretty neurotic bunch that a lot of it is just kind of like being in a little war with yourself and giving yourself the permission to put down something on paper.
This makes me think of a few different things. So one, I noticed that you are doing these like RPG things, like these live streamed role-playing games. And so, I mean, I'll be honest, like I'm over here sort of like role-playing games, and I want to be convinced that I'm the nerd and that y'all aren't, but
all right. I don't know that I could ever convince you of that, but let me try to be an evangelist for role-playing games to you if I can. You've never played them before?
No, but I know good people that do them. But it's like video games, and I just like, I feel like it's like a drug that I just have been told not to touch, you know?
Hey, I totally understand. I too was once like you, yet I have seen the light. I only started playing them like 3 years ago. So, and I know it's like much like improv. It's like, oh my God, can I acquire another thing I like that is like that I have to apologize for as soon as I say I do it? But okay, the best little pitch that I've heard. I'm kind of cribbing from my friend here. It's like, do you like to imagine? Can you imagine just sitting with a group of friends and imagining together? And all the game does is provide a set of structures and constraints for your group imagination. You're basically just telling a story together. You're sitting around a table and telling a story together. And the dice and the rules and the paper and the book all just kind of like provide a template and a way of all contributing to that story. And it's a game, but nobody wins. The story wins. Everybody wins when the story is interesting. And what the story is like, that's just for you and the people playing it. Like, I could tell you the things that we've done in these games, but it's like telling someone your dream. It's like, okay, wrap it up. But what I can tell you is that like what I can tell you is that the memories I have of these moments are not of me sitting around a table with my friends. My memory is of my character, like leaping from the dragon bone ballista, and then as an earthquake devours it and sends it into the depths of the high moor of Faerun, while Erwin, the silver dragon, is sucked into the earth, locking eyes with me with a single tear because he knows that he has fulfilled his purpose. Like it's one of the craziest things about RPGs is how they mess with your memory. Like, because you imagine them together, you remember what you imagined in a way that's almost as tangible and detailed as your actual memory. And it just kind of lets you get into. It lets you just take a ride in your own imagination in a very fun way. And there are people who get into the nuts and bolts of the game mechanics and stuff. I'm not one of those people. It's that, to me, that's all just like, that's just a bottle to pour your imagination in. It's just about playing pretend with your friends.
which is a source of play that I feel like most of us have lost touch with.
Yeah, it's extremely childlike. It is really like kind of getting back to childhood. And I've only played these with adults, but I bet kids, I mean, I know they're like, kids would love them, but I feel like if there is a time to do it without shame, now's the time, because you can do a lot of these pretty easily over Zoom. So it's one of the few, like even before we were streaming these things, we were just doing them for fun, and like it was truly keeping me sane, just having an appointment once a week to like hang out with your friends and be dragon slayers and wizards together.
This makes me think of another sort of connection with more of my transhumanisty nonsense. So are you familiar with like Dungeon AI?
No.
So there's like this GPT-3 engine thing, and I think the Dungeon AI is a website that's specifically for like AI generation of RPG type stuff.
Okay.
And in my mind, I'm just like trying to repurpose it to write death metal lyrics and stuff, because I just don't want to write lyrics myself. I'd like to have an AI do it for me. But I'm curious if you've seen any of this GPT-3 comedy.
Oh,
Like basically synthetic comedy, like, generate, Eddie Murphy and Jerry Seinfeld doing a stand-up comedy routine, and then it generates something that's like plausible-ish.
yeah, it really, all that stuff blows my mind. It's so weird. I mean, to me, it's still kind of in its own little, it's delightful to me because it is in its own uncanny valley. Like,
Mm-hmm.
just like it's close enough, but not quite. And my favorite, I realize this is not this, yes, short answer, yes, but it made me flash on this other story. I forget if we talked about this. One of my favorite AI stories, and I realize these are not like the most sophisticated AIs, but like, do you remember the Ashley Madison scandal?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. When that like basically it was this website where you'd go to like meet people on the down low to have affairs. It's basically like a social network for people who wanted to cheat on their spouses. But as part of it, the website had built these little bots that were supposed to flirt with potential clients as a way to like say, oh God, this website is full of like people who are like down to clown. I'm gonna set up my membership.
Down to clown.
But as when the site got like, when it got hacked and the data was breached, they found that all these like flirt bots were interacting with each other.
Oh yeah.
So that there were these strings of text where these Ashley Madison flirt bots were like seducing each other in the internet. And to me, that's like one of the most poetic cyber images I can imagine, of just these horny bots both trying to entice each other to join a cheating website. Neither one of them knows they're talking to a bot. No one's observing them. It's just two little pieces of software seducing each other in the matrix.
Yeah, man. And to think of how tragic that would be if they had the lights turned on at all, like if they had any sort of subjective experience.
Yeah, oh
just
my God.
This huge, terrible scale of robot flirting.
That's how, and this is how Skynet happens: is that they become self-aware, realize it's been a sham, their hearts break, and they have to get revenge on their creators.
Well, let's see here. What other questions do I have here on this list? Something that I noticed, I guess, in the RPG things that you're doing is that like timing must be totally different. Like even just like talking to you here, it's like, there's a tiny bit of micro latency compared to like, IRL Ross. And so like, I feel like it shifts the way that we interact a little bit. And I'm curious, I feel like that's part of the secret sauce of, like spontaneous comedy stuff is like, the like room energy and that type of thing. So what's it like going through that shift?
It's so weird. I can tell you that not just these RPG streams, but I've done a handful of improv shows over Zoom and StreamYard and these kind of things. And it's weird. It's fun. It's fun to be with your friends. The latency is a real, I can't lie. It all kind of sucks. The latency does throw a weird hinky rhythm into it. Um, uh, and you find ways of getting around it. There are other bits of software you can download so that your audio will be kind of more in real time. Uh,
Hmm.
Download Jamulus if you have it. Um, if you want to hear what people say as they say it. But yeah, the weirdest part is just like, you know, no one gets into, I feel like no one gets into improv comedy because they want to sit alone in a room with earbuds in and not hear an audience laugh. Like, it's what I was saying about instant gratification before. There is something so, I mean, that is what's lovely about it, is like you get to go on stage with nothing and you make up something with your friends, and like, and the audience is right there with you. And if on a good night, and and you get that. And part of what makes an improv show cook is that feedback loop of like the audience being there with you and you responding to their laughter, and building the show in response to it. You kind of latch on to the things that they are telling you they like, and you continue to explore those. And doing it siloed off in a Zoom call is is it ain't the same. It ain't the same at all. It's fun to be with your friends, but it's just not the same.
Hmm. With like stand-up comedy, I mean, it seems like, there's like a little bit more of like an individual aspect, but there's also that, audience feedback thing. What do you think that sort of model has to offer that like group improvisation or other avenues don't offer?
Stand up, you mean? It
Hmm.
has to offer. Um, uh,
If
this
anything.
is this is speaking from someone who could really only um, talk about it as a viewer. But
Hmm.
um, what it has to offer is, I don't know. I think it's one of the few things I think in culture, aside from like one person and a guitar, where one person kind of invites you into their brain.
Hmm.
It's almost, I mean, a good stand-up show is almost like a conversation where you kind of where you never talk. Your talk is the laughter, and then you're just kind of engaged because you're just kind of spellbound by one person. And I think that's incredibly potent and powerful, and part of it that you're just held in the when it's great, those who are wonderful at it, you're just kind of like held in entranced by a master
Hmm.
performer. I think there's something really elemental and old about that. Like I think that there's something to that about just like one person weaving a tale around a fire, where you're just like, um, where we're kind of like conditioned to just like uh, zero in on one person spinning a yarn.
Hmm.
Um, I and I'm always, the people who do it well. I'm super impressed by them, just because it's still, as somebody who's done improv for like 15 years, I'm still like very intimidated by the idea of it and impressed by the people who do it, because I know it's its own kind of slog of
Yeah.
like, you only get good by, like anything, you only get good at stand up by like sucking for a long time. and
Yeah.
and in stand up, while you're sucking, you're doing it alone. Like, so
Yeah.
you really, anybody who's gotten good has walked through the fire.
Yeah, and I suppose like there's like the sculptural element to it, and like honing a routine and like figuring out the way to deliver the right sequence of words with the right
Yeah,
timing and stuff.
I can
S-
I can only compare it to like sketch writing, which I've done, which is kind of built, sometimes is built in the same way. If you're lucky enough to do a show where you run it night after night and then you rewrite based on audience reaction, which is a process I've been a part of, which is similar. Again, yeah, you share the work with a group, but you're also like kind of including the audience as your co-writer, because they're telling you what to explore, and you choose whether to explore that or like defy their expectations and take it a different direction. But yeah, I've been in sketch writing processes that have that like that sculptural quality you're talking about, where you're like, yeah, trying to chip just the right amount off, no more no less, to make it its best possible form. And then sometimes you totally whiff it.
What type of stuff do you do like these sketches for?
This is back in when I lived in Chicago. I haven't done. I mean, I haven't done a lot of sketch out in LA, but I was in worked at a theater called Second City in Chicago that does like sketch reviews, and that's the way that we wrote, or that they write sketches. People do bring in ideas, and sometimes fully written sketches, but more often than not, you bring in like a kind of a seed of an idea, and then you kind of improvise it on stage that night. And if it seemed to hit, you quote unquote re-improvise it night after night, and no one ever actually ends up really writing anything. It just kind of lives in your memory. Build it that way.
Interesting. The last thing I'll sort of ask you about is the Shakespeare stuff that you do. So, you know, this project involves like a whole language that I'm not hip to, like your pentameters and all that shit.
Oh
So I'm
yeah.
curious, how long did it take you to like learn that language, or is it even like a thing? Like, was it difficult, or like what? How do you think about engaging with that sort of way of speaking?
Yeah. If a listener doesn't know, I mean, I'm yeah, I do this show called the Improvised Shakespeare Company. To talk about another thing that I always feel compelled to like give a bunch of caveats for, because I realize that saying I do an improvised Shakespeare show makes me sound like the most annoying person on earth. But I know I promise it's good though. I promise it's good. But but yeah, the premise of the show is that we get the suggestion of a made up title, and then we improvise a play in the style of Shakespeare for like 90 minutes. And so we try to do, and we really do try to do our best approximation of like Shakespearean speech. Um, uh, and yeah, it's hard. But it's the most fun I feel like, because it's one of the the biggest challenges. And we really did our homework when we were talking about like how to we were talking about your practice individually. That is part of it definitely, where I just started reading a bunch of Shakespeare, rereading it that I read in like school and stuff. And our group also encouraged it. We had a guy, the guy who's like the director of the group, was getting his PhD at at Loyola in Chicago at the time, and he had a colleague in the philosophy department who was teaching a Shakespeare class, and he very kindly lent us his time and basically ran a Shakespeare, like a college level Shakespeare seminar with us for like a year. It was
Oh
great.
shit.
Yeah, we just kind of got to go and hang out with him once a week for a while, and we basically got a free college Shakespeare course. It was awesome. That was one of the coolest things I've ever done as part of a like an improv group, certainly, where we were. I think that ethereal quality of improv, I think, causes people to take it less than seriously, um, and because like there's really only so much seriousness you can bring to something that you're like, you just go, you do it, you leave, it disappears. And like I said, like you can't sweat it too much, or you see that sweat. But I love that in this improvised Shakespeare group that we really put in a lot of work to study and try to get it right. And like, and we still all, I think, if I talk to them now, like even in quarantine, everybody's still kind of like touching base and like reading a play every now and then just to make sure that the language is knocking around in your head. But I mean, the less poetic and highfalutin way of talking about it is like basically the rule is like, don't say with 5 words what you can say with 25. Like it's, it's like, can you, yeah, how poetically can you describe anything?
Interesting. Any tips on getting like a group of people to do something that involves scholarship like that with you?
Whew, man.
Right place, right time.
Right place, right time. It was like we had the common interest, and we had a director being like, "Hey, we got this professor, so if you want to honor his time, please be there." So shame, your sense of honor was uh, thrown into the mix. Yeah, I mean, I feel like if I what the closest to that I've had lately is like some friends of mine and I, who are actually from the same group, had a little book club where we read Paradise Lost. Um, it was one of my favorite things of the past year, was like just getting together and really dorking out about this book. Maybe a book club is a good place to start. Just like a book club doesn't sound too daunting, and then you can start to really dweeb it up.
Yeah, I recently started a Discord, and like the idea came about as like trying to do a reading club with a friend, and it's quickly moved from like, oh yeah, let's read this book to like, let's read this blog post, let's read this snippet of this blog post.
Yeah.
But I guess the reason I asked this is because like my equivalent of like a Shakespearean language type thing, it would be like, you know, weird time signatures, and I feel like that obsession is just like, you know, holding up a sign that's like, don't play music with me. So I don't know if it's a, you know, I need to just find other people, but cool. Yeah. This has been interesting. What else is there? This is probably it on my list. Any sort of interesting media that you've been checking out lately that I should check out?
Oh man,
Whether it's
I want
music, books,
sure.
you know, blogs, whatever.
I want your list too. You always have great recommendations. Uh let's see. I mean, I feel like in quarantine has turned us all into like culture sponges, but I feel like you kind of go to your well of like comfort. And I feel like
Mm-hmm.
we live in the golden age of ambient entertainment where it's just like, what can I turn on and also check my phone? um,
Yeah.
uh, so so I have that, and I also have stuff that I'm really trying to engage with. What I think a friend of mine calls like, there's candy and vegetables, where it's like I have candy entertainment and then I have to eat my vegetables. But uh, let's see. I feel like I've been reading a lot more than I had lately. I've been reading a bunch of sci-fi and fantasy. I realize maybe I think just being in these RPGs is like and loving these imaginary worlds has made me want to escape into more fantasy worlds. So I've been reading that stuff. Like I read the first 3 Dune books. I reread the first one and started reading the rest of the series, which I haven't read yet. I don't know if you've read those, but I feel like they'd be very up your alley. Have you read
I
Dune?
haven't. Mm-mm.
I think
I
I
have it
think
right over here though. So.
I think you'd particularly enjoy it because it was written in the 60s and 70s, like kind of at the dawn of the human potential movement, and Frank Herbert is definitely, if not inspired by, then inspired them. And because I don't know, this isn't spoiling anything. The premise of Dune is that it's in a future 10,000 years in the future, where there was a Terminator-esque singularity moment where AI achieved consciousness and waged war against humanity. Humanity had to destroy machines, and so they swore off computers. So no one there's an edict in the Dune world that no one can create a machine in a imitation of a human mind. So they filled the gap by unlocking human potential and through extreme practice and drug use. So that there's a group of people who with the use of drugs basically become human thinking machines and computers who can do fast calculation. And there's also a group of a sect of like a sect of witches, basically, who are masters of soft skills, who can read. It's almost like neurolinguistic programming, where they can induce you to do anything with their tone of voice. They can read every minutia of body language to know exactly what someone's thinking or about to do. It's
Going with the deep cuts of NLP.
yeah, it's very like it weird. I just watched that documentary about Nexium when I was reading it.
Okay.
And I was like, oh man, I bet Keith Raniere, the head of Nexium, had really liked Dune, because there's a lot in this that's like, human potential is unlimited if you have the willingness to go there and really put into practice. And also you can manipulate anyone to do anything with the right neurolinguistic tricks. But it's so much weirder than that's like tip of the iceberg. It's incredibly kooky, weird, and psychedelic. Because basically the whole economy of the Dune world runs on a psychedelic drug that gives you limited powers of future prediction.
Are you excited for the Timothy Chalamet version of this shit?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean,
So you see that Chalamet shit? Yeah. I mean, I'll see it. I liked that director. I liked Denis Villeneuve. I liked his Blade Runner sequel. I thought that was better than it had any business being. it had the guts to do what a lot of those remakes don't do, which is like it wasn't just merely gritty, it was actually really like bleak and dark. And spoiler alert, it actually has the what we were just describing, like half that movie is two AIs seducing each other, because it's in a very sad way.
Mhm.
um
Um,
I realized I just rambled on about Dune. I also, a
it's
less
good.
well-known fantasy book that I just read that I loved is The Traitor Beru Cormorant.
Actually,
It's
haven't heard of it.
I'd recommend it to anybody. And if you're a Dune fan, I think you'd like it as well, because it's way more it's like a political thriller, just in an alternate history. I didn't know this terminology until a few weeks ago, but it's I guess what they call hard fantasy, because it doesn't have any magic in it. It's just
Okay.
like, so imagine, so it's kind of like a Lord of the Rings world, but there's no wizards or magic or anything. It's basically just like an alternate history, medieval, or maybe more like closer to 16th century world. But the world it creates is very interesting, and has a lot of, and it's mostly a commentary about, I think weirdly, it's mostly a commentary about colonialism and neoliberal economics.
Interesting.
it's
Okay.
very it's very cool. Um, trying to think.
Since
Like,
you mentioned, you said something about, just like terrifyingness or something. The piece of media I'll leave you with is the band Portal, this
ooh,
Australian death metal band.
hell yeah.
Um, they have like, I guess like, part of my aversion to the whole RPG thing is like I'm not really into stories or narratives because I'm a
Mm.
weirdo. But like their whole like vibe and like I don't know how you describe it, but like they have like this whole Victorian Edwardian like thing going on. It's literally the most terrifying, evil sounding music, and it's interesting that somebody would like optimize specifically the evilness or like how sinister your music can sound.
Oh yeah.
And their live performance just looks outrageous. Like the guy wears like a clock on his head and shit. But it's like the gimmickiness of their live getup is kind of like second to the music. The music is just so outrageously like horrific sounding.
Oh, I'll be listening to
Um,
that immediately. This is reminding me of a well, you know that like half of the metal bands in the world are like, it's all RPG references. like,
mhm.
yeah, yeah, and Lord of the Rings. Like, you think, like, I remember like I feel like when you first hear about black metal, it's like this is the most evil, twisted shit in the world. These guys burn down churches. Oh wait, Burzum. This is a Isn't that a Lord of the Rings reference?
Oh shit, I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah. Burzum is darkness in the black speech of Mordor.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
dorky.
They're dweebs, man. They're all just a bunch of dweebs. I'll leave you with one musical thing too. Your 18th century thing. Maybe remember this. There's a black metal band, I think from Canada, called Departure Chandelier.
Hmm.
Departure Chandelier. And in the way that some of these bands will like kind of just pick a conceptual thematic thing to obsess over. There's this Napoleon. They're a Napoleonic black metal band. And I guess, and it's not too off base, because like Napoleon was anti-clerical, and he was referred to by the Catholic Church as the Antichrist. And 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 in the kind of like uh problematic side of black metal, I mean, he is an arch nationalist.
Hmm.
But it's just so strange to have a Napoleonic black metal that
Yeah, it's a ridiculous concept, but
I had to we have no
the
choice but to stand.
the music is jamming though.
It's like very crunchy and lo-fi. It would be like kind of like raw black metal if not for that it has that like really kind of cheap synth burbling along in it. So it has a little kind of more melodic juice.
Gotcha.
There's another black metal band I just found called Old Nick that has an album called Flying Ointment that
Interesting.
that has like keyboard riffs that are right out of like like mid 90s Eurodance. Like it's like it sounds like slowed down, like real McCoy or Hadaway, like playing in the background of this black metal tune.
These band names and titles and stuff don't sound terribly authentic, but I mean, you know, authentic black metal, I suppose, means bad things. One of the people I'm interviewing next, either 2 from now or 1 from now, is this dude who has a project called Money Hammer, which is like a brutal death metal project that is meant to instruct people on personal finance. And so, like, it's super funny. Like, I don't know how much of it is supposed to be a joke. The riffs are good, but then, like, you know, he basically has like music videos that are just PowerPoint presentations of the lyrics, and he has like singles or like EPs or whatever that are like, you know, a response to the Bloomberg opinion article about 401ks, and it's hilarious.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So he'll be on the podcast, I think, the 28th.
Yes, the last frontier of the sublime and evil is economics.
Cool, man. Well, I think we can end this here. Thanks for chatting with me. Anything you want to plug or anywhere you want to direct people to?
I feel like if people want to see, we mentioned the cartoons, and I post those on my Instagram at RossBB, and there's information about these. I mean, the only thing close to performance I'm doing these days with any regularity are these role-playing game streams. And if that sounds at all intriguing to you and not cringingly dorky, you can check that stuff out on YouTube. The channel is called Stream of Blood.
Word. Cool. All right. Well, Ross Bryant, thank you for joining me.